There are a few things more dire in life than having a brain tumor. Worse is having one they can't operate on, one of those creeping little jerks that fingers its way through your gray matter, just fingering all the way through it. Now, the romantic drama that is Dark Victory is obviously a pretty serious film. It's a rom-drom, but I tend to keep it light when I promote our sponsor, so if you came here for some feel-bad cinema, don't worry, we will get there. For now, though, I want to brighten the mood and pitch some Java at you. Which brand of Java, though? Take a guess. It's Spark Plug Coffee. They have the freshest, fairly traded, premium Arabica beans in Canada. Snag some half-calf or decaf if you want. Half-calf? Decaf? And look at their menu to get an idea of the various blends and roasts that you can choose from. Blends. Roasts. Seasonal blends even rotate throughout the year so you can shake up your sippin'. Americans are invited to order Spark Plug 2. Their shipments will show up within a week, as they will for Canadians. But my countrymen and women up here north of the border are exempt from the delivery costs. And how about filling out a membership in the Autopilot Coffee Club? You'll get to take advantage of a wealth of deals and also perks. And as a member, you'll save money on every order. Cancel or pause anytime, but what's even more flexible than that is that you can customize to get your orders when it suits you. Don't be calling this a Coffee of the Month Club, my friends. Sparkplug.coffee/HYES is the destination I suggest you type into your browser. You'll save 20% if you use that HYES promo code. You can only nab that discount once, but make a big order and save even more money for that one-time 20% discount. So it's sparkplug.coffee/HYES. Okay, Betty, Brent, and Bogey are waiting on me to yip about their motion picture. It's time to reward their patience. So, action. Have you ever seen Dark Victory? Hey there, people and chums, and thank you for taking in the 587th edition of Have You Ever Seen? Getting close to 600. This podcast, you can do the math like I can. This podcasting channel looks back at motion pictures from days of long ago and spoils them from front to back. The person wagging his tongue in your general direction right now is Ryan Ellis. My wife Bev isn't here because she never does Friday podcasts with me, but she also continues to recover from her heel surgery, so she'll continue to miss the Monday shows too for a little longer. She should be back at it later in May. When I review movies on my own, I pick my way through the plot, one beat at a time, and I veer off into the odd tangent. Sometimes it's a lot of tangents. I also don't mind doing impressions of famous people. I really don't mind at all. In fact, I love doing it. And engaging in a modicum of tomfoolery. So I hope you won't mind me doing that either. But we can't get to the story until we talk about AFI lists and Oscars and such. So Betty Goes Blind was released by Warner Brothers on April 22nd, 1939, which makes this extravaganza a few weeks more than 85 years old. As always with movies that were made back in the days of World War II, I can't be certain where it ranked at the box office, but it sounds like the picture did pretty well. I can say that this movie is looking good on Rotten Tomatoes. 85% of critics have said nice things about it, although the sample size is awfully small because only 26 people have posted reviews on there, just 26. Their average score is a respectable 7.3 out of 10, and the audience number is pretty close to what the critics say, meaning 81% liked the picture. Director Edmund Goulding's film was nominated for 3 Oscars. He wasn't, but Max Steiner's score was, while Bette Davis was up for Best Actress, and the flick was nominated for Best Picture. That was the year of Gone with the Wind, though. That won the top trophy, and many others. Vivien Leigh also won Best Actress for playing Scarlett O'Hara, so Bette Davis, who I heard was pretty close to number 2, but she didn't win, of course. Frankly, I thought Gone beat out Dark Victory for Best Music Score, too, but actually The Wizard of Oz took it home in that category. And it's curious to see that of the 12 films that were nominated for their music in 1939, 12, Max Steiner and Alfred Newman were nominated for 2 different flicks that year, while Victor Young was up for 3 different films. But those 3 guys, in their 7 nominations in a single year, they all lost to Oz. Steiner's other nomination that year, by the way, was for Gone with the Wind. Oh, and for the record, I do approve of Wizard of Oz winning trophies for its music score over all these movies, and for Over the Rainbow for Best Song. The irony of all this Oscar talk is that the poster they show on Wikipedia says this is an Oscar winner, not just a nominee. How did they get that wrong? Not Wikipedia, but whoever designed the poster. I guess it was Warner Brothers' dishonest marketing department. And that's a big theme in this movie, lying. And since the poster was untruthful, and that is a theme in the story, I'll just give you my nutshell right here. So, Dark Victory, in a nutshell, big fat liars. Okay, nobody in this is big or fat, but it's the expression that counts. Wasn't there a movie many years ago, Big Fat Liar? Paul Giamatti was in that, all painted blue. The American Film Institute voters dig Dark Victory. Gotta say that slow, I always stumble on it. American Film Institute The film ended up 72nd on the top 100 cheers, so that's the most inspiring list, and it's all the way up at 32nd on the top 100 passions. The music score was nominated too, but it didn't make that list. Even though I think this is a pretty good film, I'm not sure I would rank it on the passions or the cheers, especially as high as 32nd on the passions. I'll discuss my issues with the romance in this movie later in the podcast, though. Not that being remade by a later generation of storytellers is a monumental thing or anything, especially these days, but they did remake this a few times. There was a 1963 big screen movie called Stolen Hours, but also a TV movie in 1976. Anthony Hopkins played the doctor, and Elizabeth Montgomery played the lady lead in that, so that's the Bewitched star. But that's all the build-up. Let's see what's what in Dark Victory, 1939. Max Steiner's grand score plays over the opening credits. Textbook stuff for the opening credits of a film set in the 30s. He's only third billed in the credits, but the very first person we see on screen is Humphrey Bogart. Old Michael O'Leary here is giving Bette Davis's Judith Traherne a call and waking her up after a night of partying. For her, maybe not him. Maybe he was partying too, but she clearly was. He's her horse trainer, and we're going to find out that she's got a lot of horses. And since we need to meet more characters, Jude and her best friend, hey Jude, Judy and her best friend Anne drive out to the stables to see what's happening. Another thing I do a lot around here, sing randomly. On the way, Bogey does one of the least convincing jumps onto a car's sideboard you'll ever see. Actually, the stunt where someone other than Bogey jumps on is fine. It's when, this wasn't Bogart doing that, it's when Bogart just stands there, barely holding onto the door of the convertible while Judy drives at a fantastic rate of speed. It's a process shot, of course, but come on, guys. You could have made it look a little more believable that he's actually holding onto the door of a moving car while standing on the sideboard. I said we need to meet some characters. Well, we're wasting no time in meeting Ronald Reagan. Alec here is a smooth talker, and he's, trying to buy one of Judy's horses, I guess? But she's not selling. There's a lot of talk about horses in these first 5 or 10 minutes. I didn't know I was watching National Velvet. Oh, dramatic foreshadowing. Judy complains to Anne that she has a headache. Stay tuned. The Jude machine rides her fidgety horse onto the equestrian track. Then the stunt woman riding in place of Bette Davis leads the Black Beauty over some nice jumps before she takes a spill. It's pretty clear that's not Bette Davis riding that horse. The horse looks like it fell right on the lady's leg, but I guess not, because she gets right up as soon as the horse does. And the reason they wiped out is because Judith had about a double vision and got confused about what the real jump was. The one in her right eye or the one in her left. Hit the one in the middle. Right, hit the one in the middle. And after being taken home and trying to slough all of it off as no big thing, she falls again, right in her face this time while walking down the stairs. Well, off camera, they didn't show a stand-in do any face planting, and Davis certainly wouldn't risk breaking her neck while tumbling down a staircase. This is a movie as much about doctors and medicine as it is about love, so this is the right time to meet the George Brent character, Frederick Steele, a doctor who tells a friend that he's quitting the brain surgery practice he has in New York to go do research in Vermont. Judy's personal doctor, Doc Parsons, Henry Travers plays him, shows up to appeal to Fred to take a look at Judith. The headaches have been going on for weeks, but only now are they bad enough that she's told anyone that she's even having them. Fred wants to leave town badly enough that he keeps refusing even this old friend's request to examine the wealthy socialite. By the way, I can't blame her for keeping her condition a secret. If I were in her shoes, I'd probably act like everything's normal too and keep living my life as long as I could. Living in denial is sometimes an easier place to be than venturing a timid toe and facing the truth land. Fred does meet Judy out in the waiting room, though, and changes his mind about seeing her when he notices burn marks on her fingers. Once he's got her in his office and comfortably seated, bright light, bright light, bright light, it slams her in the eyes after he raises the blinds, causing her to squint. This takes me back to 2015. I got shingles on my face that August, and it got into my left eye. I couldn't handle bright light for months. Not fun. I got over it after a while, but that memory's still pretty vivid, and my eye has never been the same when it comes to vision. But I can handle bright light now, at least. Bright light, bright light. Anyway, we find out that Judith's father drank himself to death and her mother lives in Paris. She says that with a hint of, we don't talk much, or at all. And we've already seen plenty of evidence that our girl is confident and fiercely independent. I guess we now know partly because she was effectively abandoned by her parents. One died, one said, I'm off to Paris, and fend for yourself. Here's money, leave us alone, leave me alone. But when Stick to My Jude can't line up a match to light her cigarette and the doc needs to guide her hand, well, I guess it's clear that him leaving town isn't going to happen. She can't line up another match to light his cigarette either. Doctor smoking seems so absurd now. I'm surprised they did it even back in those days, before we knew what smoking and cancer and all those things do to you. Or that Hollywood thought they casually smoked. That could be what it is. Maybe they just thought it and it wasn't really true. He's not a lung doctor, and this was 85 years ago, but surely a brain surgeon knew cigarettes were terrible for people. Anyway, she still won't admit anything is wrong beyond the headaches, but the good doctor can already tell that something really bad is going on in her noodle. He says that she has burn marks on her fingers that she didn't even know were there because whatever's going on in her brain is, yes, messing with her eyes and her memory, but also with the feeling in her right hand. He tests her ability to recognize objects that he's placed in her hands. Once her eyes are closed, she can't tell what's in her right hand, even when it's something as recognizable as a pencil. This is pretty sad to think someone as young as her has this kind of problem. More examinations took place off camera, apparently, so Freddy Boy shows up at her house and announces that he has to operate on her big old brain. She has glioma, which is a brain tumor. And even though they've prepped her for surgery at the hospital, she's still smoking. It's incredible that any of these old-timey actors live to be older than 50, considering they spent so much time sucking down what I believe are also unfiltered cigarettes on screen. Never mind how much they no doubt puffed off camera, too. But as good as Fred is at his job, the surgery was not a success. He consults with other doctors, and they agree that she's only going to live for maybe another 10 months, and her vision is bound to get a lot worse before she expires. Right at the point she's going to die, she won't be able to see anymore. Steele doesn't take it well, saying it's wrong that glioma is going to kill such a vibrant young woman, and since this movie is on AFI's passions list, we also have to suspect that he's falling in love with her. Although George Brent really isn't playing it like that. I don't know what I expected him to do differently. He just doesn't seem like he has romantic feelings for her. And considering he's her doctor and she's his doomed patient, he probably shouldn't, but this movie is a love story. Anyway, since she's asleep and he can't accept the truth in the first place, he lies to Anne, telling her that Judy is going to completely recover. Well, this is unethical. Couldn't he lose his medical license for knowingly lying to a patient, or in this case, the patient's friend, therefore the patient too? It's nice that he wants to make her feel better, but she deserves to know what's going to happen to her. This isn't a maybe, this is a for sure. Judy looks and feels great when she gets back home, partly because she thinks she's 100%, but also because the surgery did fix things, just not permanently. I like how she wears a Chico Marx type hat to cover up where they cut off her hair and dug into her skull. She wears a hat, I think, the rest of the movie now. Fred shows up at her house for a party, but he can't hide his concern and sorrow when Anne walks over to say hello. He confesses to her that the Jude monster is going to die. As we know, she isn't going to feel pain or show any signs of a problem for a while, but at some point the lights will go out and she's going to die, just quietly and peacefully. And he doesn't want Anne to tell Judy about any of this. The patient must never find out that her days are numbered. Would you want to know if you were going to die within a year, but were going to seem to be in perfect health in the meantime? Or would you rather be ignorant and only find out that you aren't A-OK once things go really wrong? Not sure what I'd prefer. I guess the truth. I can handle the truth. At least I think so. I talked about the bright light thing with my eye. I can relate to this thing, too. I was in the hospital a few years ago after suffering a really bad headache. It wasn't a migraine, but it was bad enough that Bev took me to emergency. And while I was waiting deep into the night, they did tests and things and all that, she had to go home and feed the dogs, but also make us something to eat. We hadn't had dinner because the pain started before we had a chance to eat. And by this point, we're both really hungry. And I was feeling a lot better, by the way. So I'm all alone sometime after midnight and thinking that maybe they're going to find something really bad, and they might even have to cut into my head. You could die on the operating table in that kind of situation, or you could be like her, dead within a year or so. And could I live with that, dying at, 48 or 49? I think it was 48 then. I wasn't as terrified about the possibilities I expected. I'm not saying I'm tough or anything, but I wasn't sitting there, feeling all that bad about it. But back to fiction, not about my petty little life. Bette Davis wasn't known to smile big. After all, think about All About Eve or Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, because she's not really a grinning fool in either of those iconic performances. But she sure is glowing and grinning while hosting this party. Judy tells Anne that she's in love, although Freddy Boy isn't returning that love yet. And who can blame him? Why would you let yourself fall for someone you know is going to be dead in a few months? Although when Anne later goes to see him on her own, she finds out that he does care about their mutual friend so much. And we should have been able to figure out how much he cares, because he never did go to Vermont like he was dying to do. He's still in New York. I guess Goulding and the writers thought they needed a Three's Company-esque misunderstanding, because Judith gets all jealous when her maid Martha tells her that Anne is out seeing Fred. That's not what Anne told her she was going to do with her afternoon. Geez, guys, lying to her is bad enough, but you could have avoided this Jack, Janet, and Chrissy scene if you had just leveled with her. Instead, Freddie Mercury gives into feelings that I don't think are really there, and he tells her that he loves her very much. They don't kiss, but they do hug. Did they ever kiss in this movie? Maybe at the end. Now, is he lying about being in love with her just because he wants her to have some joy these last few months? After all, she said she likes his jib and its cut and so forth. What if he said after hearing she's in love with him, "Thanks, you're nice too"? That might crush her. Or is he really into her and he's just worried that it's going to hurt like hell when she does die? You might say it's clear even here that he does love the woman, but I don't see that in Brent's performance. I read online that the two of them were getting to bumping during this production, but the chemistry they had in the boudoir in real life wasn't quite showing itself at this point in the movie. Anyway, he's packing up his office to leave with Judy and, yes, finally go to Vermont. She's in his office one day while he's out, which allows her to stumble across her own case file amongst his paperwork. Many doctors studied Judy's x-rays and they all agreed that her prognosis is negative. It was a little unsettling to see Bette Davis play a character who's so happy, So now we get the Betty we mostly see in something like All About Eve, caustic and cheesed off, and drinking. Over dinner with Fred and Anne, a somewhat drunk Judy reveals that she knows she won't win any victories over the dark. And she's angry because she thinks that Fred only got engaged to her out of pity. Pity marriages? Who needs them? By the way, I don't love the title Dark Victory. I know she says those words in the closing moments of the film, although not literally Dark Victory in that order. But Prognosis Negative would have been a more appropriate title. It's actually said a lot in this scene, too. Constantly, in fact. It's not catchy, but it's just more honest. That or Bette Davis's eyes don't work. Judy stays at a bar until closing time alongside a very sauced Alec. Old Ronnie Reagan lays on his drunken stupor a mite thick in this scene. Crappy president, pretty crappy actor. I read that the $50 she gives to the band so they'll keep playing would be like giving them $1,000 in today's dollars. Socialites. All the money in the world and nothing to do but party and be up all night. And die of a brain tumor. A very glum Judy continues to smoke and drink, probably even more than she did before she got sick. As unhappy as she is now, though, she looks pretty great. Ori Kelly designed a dress for her in this scene that makes Miss Davis look about as sexy as I can ever remember her being. And she keeps on wearing neat little hats to cover up the scar on her head, too. Although, shouldn't her hair have grown back by now? And then she could style it to cover up the scar? I'm not sure about the timeline of hair growth. Fred shows up at a big blowout, and Judy tells him that she hates him for not telling her the truth. I'm not sure how many times Fred has been offered a drink in this movie, but this has got to be at least the 5th time he's been offered and said no. He's going to get smashed later on, isn't he? Then they'll pay off all this drink refusal. Although he doesn't need a drop of booze in his system to get mad enough to cold cock a guy who made a mean little crack about Judy. Judy, Judy, Judy. She goes to see one of her horses at the stable, which is going to die. Fitting. So now she's even more depressed. She and Michael, the bogey character, have some cross words, but then he confesses that he's always been in love with her, and he kisses her. She doesn't want him in the first place, but angry or not, she also still has some love in her heart for her doctor. Put a little love in your heart. This scene between Betty and Bogey in the stable is an example of very long takes they used to do in movies. It's got to be a couple minutes straight where he kisses her, she pulls away, they exchange some lines, and then she leaves. The whole thing lasts a while. Actors back in the day might not have ever worked on the stage, but this is stage-like, in that they would have had to know their lines well enough to get through so much dialogue in one unbroken shot. Oh, well, I guess Fred has taken up drinking because he's at Alec's apartment late into the night, and Alec says, "Can I offer you another drink?" So much for all that drink rebuffing being some big payoff. Geez, he stops totaling his tea in a scene with this yutz, not with the lady he loves? How anticlimactic. Judy shows up, and once Alec leaves the room to give them some privacy, she begs her doctor for forgiveness. But he says there's nothing to forgive, and the romance is back on. And for the record, I believe it now when George Brent says he loves her. Maybe he just wasn't playing that inner conflict very well before. Of course, Bogart didn't exactly seem like a star in waiting, but he actually was. A few years later, of course, he would become a giant star after Maltese Falcon and other movies he made in the early 40s. Of course, Casablanca. But anyway, he wasn't really a star in waiting, I didn't think so, during that previous scene with Davis in the stable. They gave him dialogue that just didn't sound natural coming from his mouth. In fact, I'd say the guys aren't exactly lighting it up in this movie at all. Davis is. She's excellent in this, and Geraldine Fitzgerald is playing a quality Anne. So women good. The guys, okay at best. Judy has taken her maid Martha out to live with her and Fred in Vermont. The Steeles have dogs. Yeah, a pretty nice place to live, and they're free of the hustle and also the bustle. We'll find out from Martha that they haven't seen Anne in months. It seems unlikely that old Annie wouldn't make that drive to visit them at least once in a while, especially since her best friend is going to die. Although it is about a 13-hour drive, so you're not going to make that trip on a whim. Of course, the letter she sent in this scene does say that she's coming to visit them. In any case, Fred is now chin-deep in research in his Vermontian lab. No more pesky patients. Anne shows up, and Fred uses the excuse of giving her a tour of the house to tell her that he and Judy never talk about the tumor. She is doing well, but he doesn't want her to think about her crappy future, or for Anne to show any concern about it. Michael came along with Anne, it seems, partly to talk horse business, but also, we know he's crazy about Miss Traherne. I think it would have made some sense if Edmund Goulding gave Bogart a brief scene in the car to show that he's sad because A, she's going to die, I think he knows that, and B, that she's living hours away with someone else before that happens. Although maybe he doesn't know she's doomed, I don't know. Well, he does know that she married somebody else and moved far away, so he has a right to be bummed about that, but no close-up in the car. While Anne and Skip to My Jude do some gardening, Judy wonders why it got dark so fast, which of course means that the tumor is at it again. They hug, but Judy doesn't want to tell Fred about it, even though it got so bad out of nowhere that she's barely able to see anything at all. He's got to go to New York for business, and she helps him pack, She's supposed to go too, but she's trying to play off that, I gotta stay here and do things here. Good thing she knows her way around their bedroom because she has to do it while blind, but not show him that she is. Fred can't even tell anything is wrong, even though he realizes that he's crazy to plan to go anywhere without her, considering time is so precious for them. But she insists he leaves, since this voyage is all about seeing if he can find a cure for her glioma. I know she doesn't want him to worry about her, but how awful for him if she died while he's away, which of course is going to happen. How is he going to live with himself? People will tell him that he shouldn't feel guilty that he wasn't there, but wouldn't you? I would. But she won't stop insisting that he go back to New York, even claiming they have a victory over the dark. That's pretty much the name of the movie. In a different order of words. So Fred drives off while Judy guides the Anster back to the garden so they can plant some more flowers. Judy asks Anne to take care of the flowers and to take care of Fred. She probably should have put Fred first there. So marry him, maybe? Is that what she's saying? And Judy mentions their other friends, too. She wants Anne to throw a huge party after Michael wins the Nationals with her horse, Challenger. Call up Alec and Dr. Parsons as well. But Judy wants to die alone, so she says a few more nice things that makes her best friend vamoose. In fact, the last person to see her alive is Martha. Virginia Brissac, I guess that's how you say her name, is actually pretty solid in her brief screen time as the maid, especially in the climax here. Judy says goodbye to her dogs, then heads upstairs to lie down for good. I didn't cry during any of this sequence at the end, but I was pretty moved. I guess Judy has the instincts of a dog, too. They also tend to go off on their own if they sense they're about to kick. I like how Goulding has the focus puller unfocus the shot to show what it would be like to be in her shoes at this moment. Then we get the closing credits with big band music. That was maybe a little bit inappropriate. Yeah, type music when she just died. But anyway, we're out. You know what Fred's going to do when he comes home and finds out his wife died while he was gone? He's going to double down on that research and try to figure out a way to keep this from happening to anyone else. He's going to turn into Victor Fries in Batman and Robin, I think. Arnold's motivation was to find a cure for an incurable disease that killed his wife. Well, that and to toss off stupid puns and give one of the worst performances of his entire career. But yeah, Fred's grief will be terrible, although I bet he'll never leave that lab until he's found out all he can about the brain, so therefore he's never going to leave that lab. So in a way, it's a sad ending for him, too. So the cast. Bette Davis had won 2 Oscars before she made this film, and if you're thinking either of those awards was for All About Eve or Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, 2 movies we have covered on this channel, you'd be wrong. She was up for trophies for those 2 performances that came later, but she won for Dangerous in 1935 and then for Jezebel in 1938. Bette was actually nominated for 5 Oscars in a row from 1938 to 1942. She was number 2 on AFI's Top 25 Actresses list. That's a list I normally take great issue with, but I have no problem with her placement. She's one of the greatest of the greats. Although, come to think of it, I think this is only the 3rd time we've covered something she was in. I would have thought it was more than that, but I guess it's just Eve, Baby Jane, and this. All strong performances, though. Other actresses were up for the role before Bette got it. Tallulah Bankhead did it on stage, but she wasn't able to be in the movie. Other names like Barbara Stanwyck were bandied about. I love Barbara Stanwyck, but I think probably Davis was the better choice. It's weird to think that an actress as accomplished as Bette Davis would have to fight like hell to win a role at this stage in her career. 2 Oscars in, for one thing. But I guess she did. Hadn't studio heads heard about Bette Davis's eyes? Well, Kim Carnes' song came along much later, so no. George Brent got his start on the silver screen right around the time sound was becoming standard in the industry. Brent had been in 42nd Street several years before this and had been in Jezebel with Davis just the previous year. He did plenty of other films over the years, including many others with Bette, but most don't stand out all that much. The man was durable, though. He worked for nearly 50 years. Humphrey Bogart was still in the days of his career before he would be top billed or even second billed. Here he's 3rd on the depth chart. Really, he probably should be 4th because Geraldine Fitzgerald has a bigger role than he does, but I guess he was a bigger name. The man who was number 1 on the AFI's Top 25 Actors list, so Davis was number 2 actresses, he was number 1 actors, was in 6 other flicks that we have covered at one time or another. 4 of these were on the AFI's Top 100 Movies of All Time list. Maltese Falcon was, Casablanca was, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre was, one of my favorites, Key Largo, that was not, The African Queen, that was, and Sabrina. Sabrina, in fact, was reviewed by us just a few months ago, and Key Largo I did last year. So we did those 4 movies for him many years ago, and then nothing until last year, and now this year, 2 already. And I think another one's going to come up soon, too. So a lot of bogey lately. Geraldine Fitzgerald does a pretty nice job playing the worrisome Anne. She played Dudley Moore's not-so-worrisome grandmother in Arthur, which we reviewed just a few months ago. She was also in Wuthering Heights the year before this came out. That was on the AFI's list, so we covered that, and we covered Arthur, obviously. As for Henry Travers, who's barely in this, really, well, we know him best as the guardian angel, Clarence, in It's a Wonderful Life, but he was also in Ball of Fire. Hanky T was also part of the ensemble in Hitchcock's great Shadow of a Doubt. There are reviews of all 3 of those motion pictures in the archives of this channel. Ronald Reagan. What did he ever achieve? Well, besides ruining America's economy and not caring about AIDS until Rock Hudson got it, he was an actor for a long time. Reagan is best known for playing the Gipper in Newt Rockney All-American, One for the Gipper, a football drama that came out a year after Dark Victory. His last film before he went into politics, being governor of California and such, and then of course president eventually, was the 1964 version of The Killers. Edmund Goulding was the director of this film. He directed Betty a few other times in their careers, most of which were in a short period of time during the late 30s and early 40s. He was also at the helm of Grand Hotel, which won Best Picture back in 1932, and we covered it 2 years ago. He was also an uncredited director of A Night at the Opera. Sam Wood was the actual director, but Goulding's name is on the list too. That's a goofy Marx Brothers comedy we reviewed way back in the early days of this podcast. And it should be noted that Eddie actually wrote scripts more often than he directed them. I wouldn't say his film was a magnificent production or anything, but the black and white print I recorded off TCM did look all right. Maybe better than all right, especially for an 85-year-old film. Casey Robinson wrote the screenplay based on George Emerson Brewer Jr. and Bertram Bloch's 1934 play. Robinson was an uncredited writer on The Pride of the Yankees and Casablanca, two great flicks that we have yapped about in the past. The man wrote for a long time, but he also directed quite a few short films, then sat in the director's chair for one feature in 1932, which was Renegades of the West. All in all, I like seeing this movie again. My first screening of this sucker was a very long time ago, so here's another title we've covered in the past year or two that seemed like a first-time viewing for me. There are quibbles, though. While Bette Davis is terrific and the other women in the cast are at least good, I wasn't that impressed with Brent, Bogart, or Reagan. They're nothing special, not bad, just not that great. I also take issue, as I've been saying, with making the choice to lie to a person who only has a few months to live. And I didn't really buy the Judy-Fred romance until maybe the last 15 minutes, which makes its placement on the top 100 passions that much more questionable. Anyway, pretty good film, even if the love story isn't aces, and I also didn't really jibe with that title. Bette Davis's eyes was sitting right there. But, in any case, that was how I saw Dark Victory. On Monday, I'll be monologuing again as Bev continues to convalesce and get over her heel surgery. What I'll be reviewing on May 6th will be a movie I picked up from the library a day after I saw this film, Little Caesar. I told you I was going to do this movie at some point. I'm finally getting to it and moving some reviews around to squeeze it in now, or more accurately, in 7 days. We'll be seeing the making of Edward G. Robinson, movie star. Get in touch with me or with both us Ellises by firing off a handy-dandy email. The address is haveyouvseenpodcast@gmail.com. We're also available to contact on Twix. I'm at MovieFiend51 and Bev is at BevEllisEllis. She uses that exact same handle on Threads. Like our show, rate it, review it, comment, do all that in your podcast app. You've probably done it for other people. Do it for us too. But do some or all of that also on YouTube. We post our episodes there too. The destination is at HYES Ellis. Or go on YouTube and just search Have You Ever Seen. And check out Sparkplug Coffee. They'll give you a one-time 20% discount if you use our HYES promo code. So it's sparkplug.coffee/HYES. Okay, I'm going to sign off now. Thanks for tuning in on this Friday. Join me on Monday when I see if this is, in fact, the end of Rico. Meantime, I'm going to marry my doctor and never mention that this is the last time you'll ever see me alive. Because I'm just that cruel. And cut.